The day I walked away from my first marriage was the day I felt the most empowered. When I left, my daughters were still babies. I had no money, no career, no family within 1,000 miles of where I lived, and I lost most of my friends. But finally, I had a voice. When I was married, my husband would remind me he gave me everything. We were like a Noah's Ark of the American dream. 2 kids, 2 Labrador retrievers, 2 SUVs, and a beautiful home with a white picket fence. He had given me everything except the most essential thing I longed for, him. Right after my daughter was born, I remember being on the couch, clutching the monitor, milk leaking all over my shirt, tears streaming down my face, dripping off my chin, and my husband sitting there, sipping a glass of wine, chuckling at some commercial on the Golf Channel. He was right there beside me, but he was miles away. I wanted to feel connected to my husband, but what I got was emotional distance. Maybe you can relate. As a child, I understood conflict was dangerous when I lay in bed at night listening to my parents fight. I swore that would never be me. So in the moments when I wanted to tell my husband how I felt and what I needed, I stayed quiet. I thought addressing conflict was a binary choice, to either argue like my parents or suppress my feelings and needs to keep the peace. I didn't know there was another way. In my mind, it was my husband's fault I couldn't share how I felt, because the few times I tried, he didn't respond well. I believed I would talk about the things that mattered if he was receptive. I thought avoiding conflict was the only way to preserve my marriage, but that was a lie. The reality is I was afraid to step into my own power and take responsibility for my side of the street. So I stewed in resentment, and the distance between us grew until it was too late. What I wish I knew then was that I needed to speak up no matter how my husband responded. As a couples therapist, my clients tell me the same thing I once believed. They can't share what's in their hearts because of how their partners will react. But this limits them to only speaking up when they're certain it will go well. That causes resentment and the greatest cost of all, self-abandonment. The reality is that we have to stop relinquishing our power by pretending our partners control our ability to communicate. We have to stop blaming them when we refuse to show up. You've probably heard all the reasons people think relationships fail: infidelity, finances, parenting problems. But the real culprit is emotional disconnection. And it stems from the hundreds of little moments we don't communicate. The words left unspoken are what most often cause a relationship's demise. Dr. John Gottman, the leading psychologist in relationship research, found that emotional disengagement is one of the strongest predictors of divorce. Research by Drs. Paul Amato and Denise Previty found that a lack of emotional support and growing apart ranked higher than infidelity and financial stress in causes of divorce. A lack of emotional intimacy makes for an unhappy relationship. But what people don't realize is that addressing conflict constructively is a huge part of what creates emotional intimacy. And that's what makes our relationships meaningful and fulfilling. But we don't speak our minds, express our feelings, or say what we need because we want to protect ourselves and our relationships. Yet this silence cost us way more than we would have ever realized. I became a couples therapist after my divorce because I wanted to help others learn how to avoid my mistakes. Now I help people change how they communicate and speak up in the moments that I once stayed quiet. What if I told you that you have the power to create a more meaningful, fulfilling relationship by changing how you express yourself in small moments of conflict? What if I told you it's simpler than you think? By using the ABCs of effective communication, acting in the face of fear, being vulnerable, and communicating assertively, you'll build your confidence, invite a deeper connection, and most importantly, honor yourself. First, we must act in the face of fear. We all feel scared when we're faced with taking the risk to speak up, not knowing how it will land, but we have to do it anyway. That day on the couch, I was a wreck and had been since my daughter was born. I was very young, living far away from family, and recovering from a traumatic labor in which we both nearly died. I was also suffering from postpartum anxiety, but didn't realize that until much later. I needed help, but I was afraid to ask for it. When my husband ignored my tears, it sent a message that it wasn't safe to open up. I thought he would minimize my feelings and I'd feel even worse than I already did. Attachment science explains that when something feels off with the person we love most, it feels like a threat to our survival. Small moments of conflict aren't life or death, and if we give in to fear and protection, it can lead us to avoid the very conversations that would strengthen our connection most. I don't know if I would have gotten through to my husband that day, but I know I needed to try. The truth is, conflict isn't a bad thing. Every story, every book, every fairy tale has to have conflict for the characters to keep moving forward. And through this evolution, they make it to their happily ever after. In relationships, conflict offers the opportunity for emotional intimacy and personal growth. We develop as individuals and strengthen our relationships through authentic self-disclosure. I should have named my fear that day and told my husband, it's really scary to tell you how I feel, but we need to talk about it. Because when you name your fear, it dissipates. And the paradox of fear is that the more you do the thing you're scared of, the easier it becomes. It's like building a muscle. Small action in the face of fear builds an emotional muscle for hard conversations. Even if you don't get the response you want, it's empowering to speak your truth. Instead of feeling like you have no control or agency over what's happening, you're harnessing the power of your voice to advocate for yourself and your needs. You don't have to feel brave. You just have to be willing. Second, we need to be vulnerable. It's scary, but if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you won't have a connected relationship. That moment on the couch when I was sobbing and so afraid to admit I was drowning as a new mom, I felt confused, scared, and alone. I wish I had expressed those emotions, but I wanted to seem like I was strong enough to handle it. Yet by not taking the risk to be vulnerable, I robbed myself of the chance to get the reassurance I needed. Psychologist Dr. Sue Johnson's research shows that emotions point us to our needs. We're designed to pay attention to our emotions and move toward our partners when we're hurting. Our bodies send us signals in the form of emotions, so we'll know we have to take action to meet those needs. Anger says, this isn't okay. You need to set a boundary. Hurt means a wound needs healing. And loneliness tells us we need connection. Opening up about your deeper emotions gives your partner the chance to really know and understand you. And your vulnerability invites them to open up too. When my clients are truly vulnerable in therapy, their partners often move toward them with tenderness and compassion. Our brains have mirror neurons that automatically replicate what we see in others as if we're experiencing it ourselves. So your vulnerability can actually create spontaneous empathy in your partner. Being vulnerable is a risk, but without it, there's no possibility of reward. No drug on earth can make you feel as good as a moment of authentic connection. And that, I'll never know what might have been if I'd spoken up. Today, I'd have no problem saying I'm in pain and I need you. In fact, ask my husband now and he'll tell you I have no problem being assertive ever. Assertiveness isn't a dirty word. It doesn't mean you're aggressive or bossy. It means you express yourself clearly with consideration for your partner. This last part often gets lost, that you can be direct without attacking the other person. We can hold on to ourselves when we're angry and communicate on behalf of our anger with emotional maturity. My version of the assertiveness formula is this. When you do this behavior, I feel these emotions, here's what I need. For example, in terms of my ex-husband, what I should have said is, when you ignore me for the TV, I feel hurt and alone. I need to know you care about my feelings and will help me. So how do you apply this formula to your own life? Don't just silently hope your partner sees the light. Instead, tell them in a kind way exactly what you're feeling, and tell them exactly what you want them to do or say to give you the comfort, reassurance, and support you need. This is how you address conflict as teammates instead of adversaries. More importantly, this is how you honor yourself. Sometimes we're afraid to say what we need because we worry about what will come next. We hope our partners will just read our minds so we don't have to be vulnerable and assertive. But we have to stop wishing for a mind reader and understand it's our responsibility to be the crystal ball that tells our partner exactly what we need them to know. Having, expressing, and meeting emotional needs is part of any healthy relationship. But our partners can't possibly meet those needs if we don't tell them what they are. Finding the courage to be both vulnerable and assertive is what gives your partner the best chance possible to hear you without getting triggered and to be responsive. It opens the door to authentic connection and intimacy. The ABCs of effective communication, acting in the face of fear, being vulnerable, and communicating assertively are what strengthen your voice, build your confidence, and develop your self-worth. The more you follow these steps and condition that